Afternoon. Thank you for joining me here on the terrace today. Welcome to my home. Today is Thursday. It's the 30th of May. It's running away from us, 1st of June. As I said yesterday, I am starting my speedo diet. So for the first time, I've come, my house, my home this evening has got no biscuits, no chocolate, no sweet things. Fruit, yes. Well, I know you'll tell me fruit is full of what, lactose, or whatever you call it. It's full of sugar. Oh, the F can you eat anyway? Anyway, thanks for joining us today. You know, my little sayings, of those of you who watch my social media, my little sayings, which I have every day, little phrases and things. Today's one says, be good enough to forgive people, but don't be stupid enough to trust them again. And I was out having coffee with someone today, and he said, you know those little sayings, they're not, I don't write them, I find them, and I try to suit them to me, to the way I think, and it seems to, I get hundreds of views on them. Anyway, someone asked me, do they, is this one here today, forgive someone, but never trust them. Is that a reflection of anyone I know? It absolutely is. And if that person's out there listening to me, he knows exactly who he is. I'm not sure I could forgive you, actually. Anyway, my story today, I am asked a lot of times, of all the years, 30 years broadcasting and thousands of guests, who is my favorite? I don't have a favorite. It was always wonderful up to all these well-known people on my show, who famous Cliff Richards and the Jimmy Tarbucks and the Jasper Carrots and the David Cameron and Edward Heath, Jeffrey Archer. It was great, but I like the true life stories, And this is about a woman who fell to earth. Yeah. Now, let me tell you, her name was, and I have my notes here, so I will read my notes. Her name was Julian Kopek, and she was a young German woman, in fact, a teenager at the time of this story. She was raised in the Peruvian jungle. Now, her father was a zoologist, and her mother was a scientist who studied tropical birds. So she was, in fact, Julian was known as the Jungle Girl. She was, and this means a lot. You'll see now in a moment how this saved her life. She certainly knew the jungle, and she was home educated, and she went then to Lima, the Peruvian capital, to Lima to finish her studies. So when she was, what age, 17 or whatever she was, and she went to there. So come Christmas, her mother had gone to see her in Lima and was going to fly back to the jungle home that they have in the Peruvian jungle for Christmas Day to be with the father. The only flight they could get on was on Christmas Day. Christmas Eve flight was full, and etc. So they took the flight. But let me just tell you a little bit about the plane. It was called a Lockheed Electrica, and her father was very against her taking this plane. It was a plane with a bad record, and he was very against her taking her and her mother. He didn't want them to fly on that plane at all. Anyway, they couldn't get anything else, and they decided it's a bit late now, let's go and we'll take the flight, it'll be fine. So off they set, onto the plane, the Lockheed. The plane had 99 passengers on it. And I think they were a couple of rows from the back. They were in like 3 seats, a row of 3 seats. Halfway up, I don't know how long it was in the air, but they noticed the sky was getting dark, like rain clouds, etc. And the most terrible storm broke out then, huge storm. And the plane was hit by, they think, by lightning or something, and the plane was now in a nosedive to crash into the Peruvian jungle. And she remembered that she seemed to be flying out of the plane. She seemed to be, somehow, had the plane cracked open or something, but she was still strapped in her seat. And she could see the trees, she said, like broccoli, approaching, you can imagine the speed. So there she was falling down in the open air. No parachute. Of course, no parachute. Who carries a parachute in a plane? Um, anyway, that was the last thing she remembers. But she did wake up in the jungle. She had an injured shoulder. I think it was, I'm not sure what the injury was. I think it was what was the injury? So it was a broken collarbone. She was in a lot of pain. She was just lying there. She was wondering to herself, how did she survive? How? She'd fallen, incredible. She reckoned that the updraft from the storm, the trees that she hit, and somehow the seats had made some sort of wing or something, but slowed her down as she hit the trees or helped. Anyway, she survived. So here she is in the jungle in the middle of nowhere, not knowing what to do, and there wasn't a sight or sound of her mother or any of the passengers. It was only when she got up eventually and looked around she saw some bodies lying there. She was frantically looking for her mother. She was in a terrible lot of pain with her collarbone. It's an extraordinary story, one of my favorite in 30 years. Anyway, she survived. She was alive, but now she was faced with getting out of the jungle. Now, she did know, because of her education and her upbringing in the jungle, she did know, for example, what she found a packet of lollipops, which must have fallen out of one of the passengers. So she took that package of lollipops with her, and she set off to try to find her way out of the jungle. She wasn't long, maybe couple of minutes, when she noticed overhead with these vultures, flying vultures overhead. And she came sort of around some trees, and there was 3 passengers in their seats, smashed to bits, and the vultures helping themselves on them. She hushed those, whoosh the vultures away, and was checking. She couldn't recognize these passengers, but she knew that none of them, thankfully, were her mother. So she still believed her mother had survived. One of the things that she knew is that she had to find a river, because then if she went headed towards the mouth of the river, that would bring her back to some sort of civilization. She also knew how to survive in the jungle by what she could eat and what she couldn't eat. Anyway, it was during the rainforest time, the rainy season, and it's tropical rain, and it was just lashing day in and day out. And she walked to find the river, and she eventually found the river, I think 5 days after from the crash site. And another little trick that she learned from her father was the river in the Peruvian jungle have piranha fish. And you know what piranha fish is, they eat flesh off you. They'd have you stripped of all your flesh in 2 minutes. But her father said that the piranha fish are at the banks of the river, at the shallow there. So he said, if you're ever in a river, go to the deep part of the river. So she walked with the river up to here, towards what she believed would be the mouth. Now this went on for many a day. She was still very injured. It was on her 10th day that she was ready to give up. She was very tired. She hadn't got that much food. She knew what berries to eat and what berries not to eat. And she was about to give up. She was in a lot of pain. She got a lot of maggots in the wound here, were eating it away. And it was, Then she came across a hut, a little hut that had a grass roof on it, or leaves on it. It was wide open, no one there. So she went in, and there was nothing there except a little can of petrol. So she poured the petrol on the wound. Now she learned this. See, remember, she was known as the Jungle Girl. Of all the people to survive, she was probably in the best condition to have survived a jungle like this. She poured the petrol on the wound. She learned that from her father also, because they had quite a few animals. And then she lay down and she slept sheltered for the first time in 10 days. Anyway, she woke up to hear voices. and it was a Peruvian fisherman at the riverbank. And she walked out immediately. Now, these Peruvian fishermen got an awful shock. Her dress was all torn, was all blooded from the shoulder. Can you imagine 10 days after being in a crash, what state she was in? At first she said they thought she was the river girl or the river goddess. They were ready to run. But she explained she was in the Lockheed, the Peruvian air crash, and they brought her to safety. Okay? It was incredible. It really was incredible. And 14 people out of 99 people survived that crash. But some of them were so bad, most of them were so badly injured that they couldn't move. I don't know how many survived after they were taken out of the jungle, or how many, I'm talking about the ones that survived, how many had actually died. But she survived to tell her story, and she lectured all over the world about this extraordinary thing. No one knows exactly how someone can fall from the sky and survive without a parachute. No one. But, she thought, as I said, that the last thing she saw was these thick trees, which she thought looked like broccoli. So she hit them. She was in the chair, still strapped in, so they must have shielded her body from being broken by the blessing of God. The seat might have turned so it's hitting the trees, and that broke her fall, and she survived. I thought it was a fascinating story, and it's probably the one that I remember possibly best, because and it's a wonderful book as well, The Girl Who Fell to Earth. I think it was made into a movie, but honestly, I interviewed tons and tons of people, and enjoyed so many of those interviews. Had a good laugh with so many of the interviews as well, and I just thought for tonight I'd just bring you through the one, because it's often asked, who did you enjoy interviewing most? And I think it was probably her. Now, the other day, I told you how I fell out with Bruce Forsyth. You remember that? Because he thought I was selling stories to the press about him, which was absolute nonsense. Now, I'll just tell you very quickly as I wrap up now, how I fell out with Terry Wogan. Jeez, I'm an awful man falling out with all these people, but blameless. Terry had been on my show a couple of times, and we got on very well. He always took the mickey out of me by saying, "Oh, you're the rich one living in Marbella. We know you, Bolans. You're all rich, aren't you?" He'd always do this sort of, God, he must be worth millions, Terry Wogan. Anyway, one day I booked him on my show, and one of the things that I suppose, if I had any talent, was to be able to track people's private telephone numbers. I don't know, I just would know someone who would know someone who would know someone. I said, don't tell you that I'd ring this woman, she knows him and her. But I had Terry Wogan's number, and I phoned him. I said, "Hi, Terry." He said, "Hi." And I said, "I'd like you to come on this evening." I can't remember, it was something that was a new TV show he was doing, or something that happened. Anyway, he agreed to come. He said, "Fine, what time do you want me at?" And I said, it was an evening show, I suppose, let's say 9 o'clock, which is 8 o'clock English time. And ladies and gentlemen, he was a huge star. You remember, Terry Wogan was probably the biggest name in radio and television for at least 10 years. So I was delighted to say that my special guest tonight is Sir Terry Wogan, Sir Terence Wogan. And the time came, and normally that happens, I put a record on, and then I will phone up his house, and I said, "Terry, are you ready?" Phoned up the house, and his wife Helen answered the phone. She's a lovely person. I said, "Hi, Helen, is Terry there?" And she said, "Terry's gone out." And I said, well, I can't remember what I said, but I got a shock, and I said, "Terry's agreed to come on my show, and my audience is waiting for him right now." I don't know if I lost my temper, or if I sounded angry, whatever it was. And Helen said, "Morris, there's nothing I can do about it." So that was that. That evening when I got home, the phone went, and it was Terry Wogan. And he said, "Don't you dare ever phone my house and be rude to my wife." He said, "I phoned you your answer phone was on. I left a message to say I had to go to the BBC, whatever. So don't ever phone my home again. And put the phone down. And I played my answer machine, and that's Miss Terry said, in a jovial voice, sorry, Morris, I really can't make it tonight. And that was probably done at about, say, 6 in the evening. But then I left my house maybe at 5 to 6 and got to the radio station to prepare for my show. He never spoke to me again. I never tried him again. I was embarrassed. But it wasn't really my fault, was it? Anyway, let's cheer up and say good evening to you all, and have a wonderful evening, and I'll speak to you shortly. So be safe, be happy, and for tonight's dinner, because I'm on a diet, I'm going to have trout, fresh trout, on a bed of rice. Will that do? Goodbye.